What is going on, Relocation Football League fans? Welcome to a special off day edition of Miners Live. It is a Thursday edition. You guys don't normally get these. It's typically left for Wednesdays, but Wednesdays are often a bit hectic and crazy, especially leading up to the RFL podcast at 8:30. But I did want to get something in quick because our game this week is going to be recorded ahead of time. So I'm not going to do anything on Saturday morning leading up to the game. And I probably won't have a live post game after the game on Saturday as well. So I'm going to give me 1 second here, guys. I totally dropped the ball on something. So we do have about 40 minutes, I would say, until the 8 o'clock game tonight, the Columbus Explorers and the London Monarchs. So I have some things that I want to go over, and with the NRC game being tonight, I'm going to really stick to a ARC focus in terms of what I'm going to discuss. I do have a similar setup and a similar thought process for what I'm going to go over here in a minute for the NRC. I'm just not going to do it tonight. I'll probably do it possibly next week. And also I will have some exciting news to announce next week about the continuation of Miners Live and some news for you guys that I think you will appreciate. Trying to get a little bit more consistency in the content, but also to try to alleviate and eliminate some of the nonstop content that you guys might seem like you're getting bombarded with. So some exciting news on that front that I will announce to you guys later in the week. So give me a minute here as I'm still trying to get this set up because I completely forgot to get this out to everyone. So most of you probably don't even know that I have gone live and that I'm doing this before the game tonight. So I want to give everyone a chance to get in here before I start going into this, because inevitably, as you all know, with anything that I do, there's going to be questions. There's going to be disagreement. There's probably going to be a little bit of controversy. Many of you guys are certain to disagree with what I might have to say. But we'll give it about a minute so I can get some more people in here. And I imagine turnout tonight going to be pretty low simply because no one knew. I didn't even know I was going to do this. I've been teasing this for probably a week in the coaches lounge. And just looking at where the RFL is right now and looking at the fact that the trade deadline just came and went, I think that there's a lot of things that are going unsaid. And I think there's a lot of, I guess I'm trying to figure out the nice, polite way of putting this, or the best way to put this so as to not offend people. I guess the trade deadline came and went. There are teams that have no business operating under the mindset that they are a playoff contender and certainly a Relo Bowl contender. There's teams that, if you are in fact going through the rest of this season thinking to yourself in your head that you have a chance to win the Relo Bowl or even make the playoffs, there are several teams where you are delusional if that's how you really feel. And as a general manager of a team, my opinion, and again, these are my opinions, everything that I say is just how I feel, but there are certain responsibilities that you have as a general manager of a team in the Relocation Football League. Your number one responsibility, your number one priority is to look out for the best interest of the team, right? And your number one priority is to put your team in a position to succeed. And that doesn't necessarily mean right now. I understand that we live in the right now, and that's all anybody cares about is the right now. But the reality of the situation is we just saw something we've never seen before in the RFL. A team go 17-0 and then go 4-0 in the postseason and run the table and go undefeated. And you're going to see that team in about a half an hour. And they've gotten a loss this year. They lost to the Thunderbirds, but by God, the Thunderbirds seem to be the only team that really give them consistent trouble. And maybe the Monarchs can surprise the world. I think that's kind of what would have to happen. Yes, it would be like the Monarchs surprising the world if they won tonight. It's possible, but nobody outside of the Monarchs locker room thinks that they're going to win that game. Right? But the Monarchs are not a team that I am talking about when I look at teams that are moving forward under false pretense, I guess is the best way of putting it. There are certain teams that you can go to Neon Sports and you can look at the standings. And again, I'm not going to go into this too in detail for the NRC, but just looking at the standings real quick, I know for a fact that there are 2, possibly 3 teams in the NRC alone that have absolutely no business doing anything to help their team in 2023. And I know that sounds harsh, but if you know you don't have a chance in 2023, then move towards 2024 and give yourself a chance the next year, right? This is me, and this might be how I feel, and no one else might feel this way. But for me, the worst place that you can possibly finish in the standings at the end of the year, the worst place to be is 1 game out of the playoffs. Or sometimes even the worst team to get into the playoffs. And obviously, if you get into the playoffs, you're happy and you've given yourself a chance. But to me, the worst place you can possibly be is one of those teams that finished. The worst feeling in the world is finishing second place in your division and not getting in the playoffs. Because now there's 7 teams that make it. There's 4 divisions. So for the most part, 3 of the 4 second place teams, for the most part, 1 second place team every year is not going to make it. Yeah, there's going to be some scenarios where maybe the third place teams in a division get it and multiple second place teams in the other division don't get in. But by and large, you're going to see scenarios where the 1 and the 2 teams in each division get in. And again, that's not always the case, and there's going to be instances where that doesn't happen. But the worst place that you can possibly be is second place in your division and not get in the playoffs. Because not only do you have no shot this year in 2023, but you also have put yourself in position to not really benefit all that much in terms of your draft capital. Because by finishing second in your division and not making the playoffs, you've pretty much solidified the fact that you are going to be picking somewhere in that 14 to 18 range, right? Because 14 teams are going to make the playoffs. There's 32 teams. So the worst team that made the playoffs will pick 19th. So of the teams that don't make the playoffs, the worst possible spot that you could pick from is 18 if you didn't make the playoffs. And so for me, I want nothing to do with ever picking 15 to 18. 15 to 18 to me is the worst. After the season's over, it's not the worst. The worst is really 25, 24, because you made the playoffs and you got an extra game in, but you lost in the first round. And I know full well what that feels like. Having won the division 2 years in a row and getting bounced from the playoffs in the first round the last 2 years. I know exactly what that's like. It sucks. I hate it. But it's also why each of the last 2 years I traded and I moved up so that I wasn't picking in those spots. Or if I was picking in those spots, it was not my first pick. 2 years ago, I was able to trade up and got I think it was the 14th or 15th overall. I moved up from 23 or 24. And then this past year, I had 23 and I was able to move all the way up to 12. And I ended up having 3 picks in the first round, right? So if you know you're not going to win this year, and there's a lot of teams out there that should be at least entertaining that philosophy, but there's not. There really isn't. And I know this because I've had conversations with those coaches. I have seen how they operate, see how they are running their team. And they just are playing this year out. They are playing for this year. And in their defense, the only thing that I will say that, again, I guess this is in their defense, and this is really the only thing that I can do, is say that the trade deadline is perfectly situated at week 8. And the reason I say that is because week 8, a lot of teams think that they have a chance. Even if you only have 3 wins, even if you are 3-5, even if you are 2-6, even if you are 2-6 and your 2 wins are auto wins, when week 8 comes around, there are teams out there that are not mailing it in. They legitimately think at 2-6 with 2 auto wins, or maybe 1 auto win and an RFL win, that they have a chance. And to me, again, you all know this, and as players and as fans of the league, you probably recognize this, and you have formed your own opinions. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out that I might operate a little bit differently than a lot of other coaches. You've certainly seen what transpired over the course of the last 5 days and how my thoughts and my opinions on certain situations ruffle feathers. Guys, it's been 2 years. There should be no one in the comment section right now. There should be no one in the RFL Discord at any point from now moving forward, or from now dating all the way back to 6 months prior. I should be able to go back the last 6 months in the RFL Discord, and nowhere should I see anybody say anything like, wow, Coach Dunn really has a strong take, or gives hot takes, or has strong opinions. That shouldn't be there, because you all already knew that, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, that's why you all like the show. So for me to look at certain teams that have losing records and see them operating as if they have a chance to win is a little bit mind-blowing to me. And maybe the term mind-blowing can be offensive to some people. I'm sorry, it's not an offensive term. It's a It's a term showing the level of shock that I have towards a certain situation. So if I say something's mind-blowing, it means my mind is blown. I am shocked. And I am right now shocked at the amount of teams in the RFL that think they legitimately have a chance to win the Relo Bowl. And to a smaller extent, even the amount of teams in the RFL that think they have a chance to make the playoffs. And I mentioned this in the coaches lounge about a week and a half ago. I brought up to all the other coaches. I said, hey guys, is it me, or do we have fewer teams this year that I think are 100% out than we do normally at this time? Because I feel like, and again, maybe I'm wrong. If I went back and I looked at where we were in week 7 and week 8 and week 9, maybe week 8 and week 9. If I went back last year and the year before and I looked at it, maybe I would find that, you know what, I am wrong. And it seemed that my perception was this, but that isn't the fact. I was looking at the last week and a half, thinking to myself, there are fewer teams right now that are 100% out. And really what I meant by that was there are a lot of teams that are in this area right here, right? Like there's a couple teams here and there's a couple teams here, but the majority of the league is in here. And I feel like in years past, at week 9, that wasn't the case. There were a lot more teams in week 9 that we could look at and be like, no, you're done. You're done, pal. It's a no for me, dog. Like this year, I didn't get that feel. However, there are certain teams that I have that feel for this year. And some of them are going to blow your mind. Okay. And for whatever reason, you'll see when I get to these. I've got 4 teams right now in the ARC. Now, I'm going to throw out the caveat and the disclaimer right now. Only about 1 or 2 of these teams do I feel like are 100% out. And I'm not talking mathematical. I don't want Forbes and I don't want Mitchie to go look at the remaining schedule and all of the different scenarios of every team that they play and what the mathematical percentages are. That's not what this exercise is about. But there are about, I think 2 of these teams I feel are 100% done. But the other 2 teams, I promise you, I might be the only person who thinks that they are 100% done when you see those teams. And it's going to shock you. But again, I might provide you with hot takes, and I might provide you with things that will blow your mind, that you might think are ridiculous. But I will never do it without some sort of supporting argument. Whether or not you subscribe to that argument is entirely up to you. All right. So before we go ahead and get into it, because we got about 20 minutes left and I wanted to check and see if we got anything in the chat before we get to that point. Okay, so before we go there, here's a good one, because this Coach Q here. You're supposed to coach like you believe you have a chance. So you're supposed to put your best product on the field to give yourself a chance to win week in and week out. However, if you can't look at, and I'm saying you because you this is your comment. If you can't look at your team versus another team, and not even another team, another handful of teams, if you can't look at that and say, you know what, it's in my team's best interest for the future of this franchise, right? Because again, as coaches, we are not players. Players might care a lot more about this year and this year only. Coaches, and really, it's not coaches. Like, we refer to ourselves as coaches, but I often don't. I don't like to refer to us as coaches. I like to refer to us as what we truly are, and that is the general manager. We are the general manager of this team. So, I want to win every game. But do I go into week 8 with a record below 500 thinking that I have a shot to win the Relo Bowl? Or do I entertain the thought of possibly selling off some of my guys to get talent, to get draft capital, to get younger, to get guys that are under contract for greater number of years? That's what I'm doing, right? Like, that's why I got rid of AJ Pestock. AJ Pestock is no longer a member of the Miners because he had 1 year left on his contract. And great for the Huskies for being able to re-sign him. But they re-signed him for 3 years. 3 years from now, AJ Pestock is going to be a low 80s player. And then the Huskies are going to get nothing for him when he retires. And unless the Huskies win the Relo Bowl in that 3-year period, and it wasn't even AJ, and if they do win the Relo Bowl, it would have been worth it. However, it wasn't just the AJ Pestock deal that got the Huskies to that point. There was a lot of other moves that they made. Smitty made a lot of moves for that franchise to get them to where they are. And if they win the Relo Bowl, it will be because of the collective moves that were made. So yes, I completely agree, Q, that you coach like you believe you have a chance. But if I've got a 85 to a 90 overall star dev player who's 30 years old and he's on the final year of his contract, and I am 3-5 after week 8, I'm looking to trade that guy. That guy does nothing for me moving forward. He has very little value to me moving forward. I'm assuming that I'm probably not going to go on a gigantic run and make the playoffs. And now, again, I understand I'm the bad person to speak about that because last year I had to win 5 games in a row at the end of the year in order to win the division. I was playing for 2023 at week 12 of 2022. I'll be completely honest. I was playing for the next year. The only way that I could have made the playoffs was if I won 5 in a row the last 5 games of the year. Not 5 straight up games, 5 RFL games. I think the last 6 weeks of the year, I had 5 RFL games and 1 NFL game. I had to win 6 in a row, and only one of them was guaranteed. So I agree. You play like you think you have a chance to win, but you've got to put your team in a position to win in the future. Now, Coach Q, you don't have to worry about this because you're not a team that this relates to. So I don't know if your comment was geared towards you thinking that I was going to mention you as one of those teams. I promise you I'm not. But all right, so let's get right into it because we've only got about a little more than 15 minutes left, and I'd like to give you guys a little bit of time for some questions. So without any further ado, I've got 4 teams here that, again, I think are not making the playoffs whatsoever. They're just not making the playoffs. And I will start with the teams that are a little bit easier for you guys. You might be able to say, oh yeah, well, duh, Don, that's not really, come on, I expect you to have a hotter take than that. Okay, so we'll just get started with the Salt Lake City Pioneers. So for my money, the Salt Lake City Pioneers are done. And they should be playing for 2024. At this point, they really have no business operating under the mindset that they're going to win this year. They only have 2 RFL games left at home, so that's difficult. Their next 4 RFL games are all on the road. Okay, so that's not an easy situation to be in. And their quarterback, who has, I believe, a 12-11 touchdown to interception ratio right now, so that's not good. And compounded the fact that he just lost his dev. So what part of the Salt Lake City Pioneers are going to get better? And even if they do get better, what part of the Salt Lake City Pioneers are going to get 2 games above 500 better the rest of the way? I just don't see it happening. And I see, I see a comment in the chat here. I don't know. I missed it. Somebody said something and it was about oh, here it is. I have no idea who Duffman is. So basically you're saying the Miners are in a total rebuild. We were in a rebuild. Our off season was the start of the rebuild. That all of you guys know that. I traded away our number 1 X factor middle linebacker. I traded away our superstar quarterback, and I got draft capital. Like, that was the rebuild. Now, I was anticipating that the rebuild would last an entire season and possibly even into next season. If you take a look at the draft capital that I have, I've got, I believe, 7 draft picks in the first 4 rounds next year. Maybe 6 now because of the trade with the Gunners. But yeah, the Miners were in a total rebuild. But I think everyone would agree that the way that we're performing right now is a pleasant surprise. I was not anticipating being 6-3 going into week 10 whatsoever. Zero part of me. There's 0 part of me that thought we were going to be 6-3 going into week 10. All right. So the Salt Lake City Pioneers for me are just, they're out. I can't see them making any kind of run. And so for that reason, I'm out. The other team that I look at, and this one here, you guys might think is a little bit more of a stretch than the Pioneers, but also maybe a little bit more of a no-brainer. And for me, that is the Brooklyn Bulls. So you see the headline there, South and the North. Look, the ARC North is arguably the toughest division in the entire RFL. And right now, at 4-4, it's really difficult for me to envision a scenario where the Brooklyn Bulls can make a run. Now, I have one thing that I point out there that you can look at as a negative or a positive, depending on how things go, but they haven't played a single game this year against their division. They still have all 6 of their games left on the schedule against the Aviators, the Cougars, and the Huskies. That's crazy for us to be at week 10 and they still have to play everyone in their division twice. Now, I look at that as a negative because the North is so stacked and everybody beats up on each other. Plus, the fact that those other teams have already played against each other. So some of those games where the Aviators may have got a loss because they played the Huskies, or the Cougars may have got a loss because they played the Aviators, or the Huskies may have got a loss because they played the Cougars. Like, those teams have already had those games and their records are still ahead of the Bulls. So for me, the only really path that I can see the Brooklyn Bulls making the playoffs is if they literally sweep two of the three division rivals that they have. And I say Columbus and Toronto only because right now I don't know what to expect of the Cougars. They've lost 3 games in a row, and they've got a very difficult matchup this week with, again, a division rival in the Aviators. So, I just think that this division is way too tough for a team that's 4-4 at this point to be able to realistically carve a path to the playoffs. And maybe I'm wrong. Again, they could win both games against Columbus, both games against Toronto, and now all of a sudden that gets them to 8 wins. I believe they still have 2 automatic wins. That would get them to 10. And then maybe they get 1 win against the Cougars. That gets them to 11. Maybe they get in with 11. Maybe the Cougars go into even more of a free fall and the Bulls are able to get to 3rd. The Cougars finish 4th, and 3rd place in that division being that tough, that might get them in with 11 wins. Yeah, that's a possibility. I just don't think that it's I guess the better way of looking at this is, do I think that there's a better chance that they make the playoffs or a better chance that they miss the playoffs? And I think that there's a significantly better chance that they miss the playoffs for those reasons that I pointed out right there. All right. So moving on from the Brooklyn Bulls, we've got 2 other teams here that I point out that these are the ones that I think you guys might find a little bit interesting. And so I will get right into it, and I will pull up here the London Black Knights. Now, the reason this one is interesting is simply because they're 6-3. Right now, the London Black Knights are 6-3. How in the world can I sit here and tell you that a team that is 6-3 has no chance of making the playoffs? This is one of those teams where if they're going to, here's what I think happens. And I pointed this out on the headline. I think that the London Black Knights are going to end up being the team that has the best record in the ARC to not make the playoffs. And they might have the same record as a couple other teams, right? Like I could envision a scenario where we don't make the playoffs and the Black Knights and the Miners might have the same record and neither one of us make the playoffs. Or maybe it's the Dreadnoughts, right? Like I don't think 3 teams are getting in from the ARC South. So either the Dreadnoughts or the Miners or the Armadillos are not getting in. And that's assuming that the ARC South even gets 2 teams. So I just look at the Aviators, the Cougars, the Huskies, the Bulldogs, and the Armadillos all remaining on this schedule. And I don't know, I don't have a path for the Black Knights winning more than 1 or 2 of those games. And if they did win 2 of those games, we would all be shocked. Right now, McCall has the lowest touchdown to interception percentage of all the quarterbacks in that division. He has the lowest completion percentage of all the quarterbacks in that division, and he's thrown for the fewest yards. And at this point, late in the season, they're going to have to put up points. They're going to have to move the ball down the field. McCall's going to have to throw for more yards. He's going to have to throw more touchdowns and fewer interceptions. And again, it's a possibility. Look at their record. They already have 6 wins. Realistically, you can make an argument they only need 5 more wins to get in. And I believe 2 of those wins are automatic. Possibly 3 of those wins are automatic. But again, they're not going to win the division because I think the Celtic Tigers are running away with it. And look at the challenging schedule they have ahead. Aviators, Cougars, Huskies, Bulldogs, Armadillos. I just don't see it. I think the Black Knights have the best record to not get in the playoffs. And whether that's 11-7 or maybe they're really unfortunate and it's 12-6, I can't imagine 12-6. Now, I think 12-6 will get them in. I just think that they lose 4 of their remaining games, and there's a greater chance that they go 10-7 or 9-8 than there is 11-6. And if they do that, I don't have them in the playoffs. And then the last team that I have here, because we got about 5 minutes before kickoff, and I'd like to get you guys a chance to get a couple questions in before. The last team that I have here is the Orlando Sentinels. This well, I should have put this one up earlier. This one is a little bit of a no-brainer. But the reason I put this one a little bit later on is because they're 3-6, and it's easy to look at them and be like, wow, they suck. They're terrible. They've only had 1 auto win. So they got 4 automatic wins coming up. So they're automatically at 7 wins no matter what. And again, we're talking about a scenario where you could get in with 10 or 11. So maybe I just don't see it, right? Right now, they've basically got 7 wins. They've got 3 in the books and 4 automatic upcoming. So they got 7 wins, 2 games against the Celtic Tigers and 1 against the Bulldogs. Let's give them 1 of those wins. I can't give them 2 of those 3 wins. I can't. And I promise you that when the spreads come out, Smitty's going to have the Sentinels as the underdog in all 3 of those games. So I think I'm being generous in saying that the Sentinels are going to win 1 of them, but I just don't see it happening. And at this point, whenever they play at home, they lose. They've got 6 losses and 4 of them are at home. So I just don't envision a scenario where the Sentinels can get in. So right now, I've got 4 teams. I went over the Salt Lake City Pioneers, the London Black Knights, the Brooklyn Bulls, and the Orlando Sentinels. I just don't think have a chance to get in. Oh, I shouldn't say that. They have a chance to get in. I just don't think that they will. And if you told me I had to bet money, I would bet money that they were not getting in. I don't see it. And so I look at those teams and I wonder to myself, why didn't they make moves to get better next year? Certainly in the case of like the Salt Lake City Pioneers, right? Like you could look at the Salt Lake City Pioneers and you could easily say, okay, they're probably not winning that division. They're probably not making the playoffs. They've got a good group of young, talented guys. Why didn't they make moves to get rid of some of their older guys and bring in some of those newer guys? Right? Like you've got guys on contract years they could have gotten rid of. And they didn't. You know, like I'm looking at, how old is he? No, he's too young. Maybe they really don't. I mean, there's 80 overall. So here's one. Here's an 80 overall, Connor Bussing, 80 overall left guard. He's 30 years old. And he's in a walk year. It's the last year of his contract. He's 30 years old. He's an 80 overall offensive lineman. They're going to get nothing for him when the season's over. They're not going to re-sign him. At least I don't envision they would. Maybe they do. But is re-signing Connor Bussing better than trading him for a 3rd-round pick? Would you give up a 3rd-round pick to get an 80 overall offensive lineman? We've seen the market for offensive linemen. I traded an 80 overall 23-year-old offensive lineman for a 1st-round pick 2 years ago. Now, obviously, this is a 30-year-old, so there's a big difference there. But the market for linemen is there. So I just think that there's teams that could have made moves to better position themselves for the future and didn't. And again, that's just one kind of example off the just looking at it real quick. But you can look and see who the older guys are on a team that is not going to make the playoffs, or the guys that are in contract years on a team that is not going to make the playoffs, that may want too much money that you may not be able to afford. And you can pose the question, well, why didn't you entertain moving those guys? And I think that there's a lot of coaches out there that if they felt that way and they thought that way, they may have made those moves. But again, I go back to what I said at the beginning of the show. I think most coaches operate like they just want to win every game no matter what. I promise you guys, if the Miners lose 4 games in a row, I'm going to be starting younger guys. And at this point, the trade deadline's over, so there's nothing you can do. I can't trade guys at that point. But I'm going to be positioning the team for the future. Now, for me, it's not really an issue because most of my team already is positioned for the future, with the exception of very few guys. I got Anton Burley, who's probably the best older guy on my team. But he's there for, I think, 2 more years. So in 2 years, I'll have him for 2 more seasons. But guess what? The way that this rebuild has gone for me, the next 2 years are in the window. I wasn't anticipating the window starting this year. I was anticipating the window starting the middle of next year. And so I got lucky to have a chance right now. Here's one question. So the game's about to start. I'm going to get like 2 questions if I can. Here's one done. Who you think gets the number 1 overall pick? Great question. I think we might be looking at a scenario where the Houston Gunners get the number 1 overall pick 2 years in a row. I don't know. There's a couple teams in the NRC. The Sentinels. The Sentinels could get the number 1 overall pick. The Bulls could get the number 1 overall pick. They look at their remaining schedule. Right? Coach Hugh, it's going to be hard to get in the playoffs with 7 wins. It's impossible. It's impossible to get in the playoffs with 7 wins. Unless you mean 7 RFL wins. It's impossible. If you get 7 RFL wins and then you're 5 automatic, well, now you got 12, and now you're 12-5 on the season. 12-5, you're pretty much guaranteed to get in. If you're 12-5 and you don't get in, that sucks. That's literally the worst place to be. If there is a team out there that goes 12-5 and they don't get in the playoffs, I'm sorry. I will send you a consolation gift. I feel really bad for you because that is the worst place to be. Forbes brings up a good point. The Gunners don't even own their first pick this year. Boy, was that a stupid decision. So yeah, whoever has the Gunners first pick this year, please, I don't even remember. Is that Frankie? Oh no, I think it's Frankie. Do we have another question before we get you guys out of here? Because I know the game's starting. I don't see anything here. So yeah, we good. Yeah, we're going to get you guys out of here. Go enjoy the game. I didn't see I don't know why I brought Fry's comment up there. They don't have any. We'll get you guys out of here. Go enjoy the Columbus Explorers and the London Monarchs. And don't forget, we've got another RFL Friday night game tomorrow, and then the full slate on Saturday. And don't forget the Miners and Bulldogs game. I'll tell you right now, the outcome of that Miners Bulldogs game is going to significantly determine my thought process the rest of the season. If we win that game, then I'm all in at that point. If we lose that game, I think we have a significant uphill battle. But it remains to be seen. So thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate it. And again, I will have Special announcement later on, either this weekend or early next week. I think you guys are going to love it. I think it's going to be great for the league. It's going to be great for me. It's going to be great for, I think, some of the other coaches. But most of all, I think it's going to be fantastic for you guys. And at the end of the day, we do this for you. I do this show for you. Smitty and the front office, they do the weekly podcast for you, and all the other guys do their shows for you to give you guys content and entertainment. But keep an eye out. I will have a special announcement between now and midweek. So stay tuned for what that is. Until next time, thank you again for tuning in. I am your host, head coach, and general manager of the Sacramento Miners. Take care, everybody, and enjoy the Explorers and the Monarchs. Good night.